Chapter 4 The Fall. Part 1 The Covenant of Works. Question 12. I proceed to the next question. What special act of providence did God exercise towards man in the estate wherein he was created? A. When God had created man, he entered into a covenant of life with him upon the condition of perfect obedience, forbidding him to eat of the tree of knowledge upon pain of death. For this, consult with Genesis 2, verses 16 and 17. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat. For in the day thou eatest of it, thou shalt surely die. The subject of our next discourse is this covenant of works. This covenant was made with Adam and all mankind, for Adam was a public person and the representative of the world. For what reason did God make a covenant with Adam and his posterity in innocence? 1. To show his sovereignty over us. We were his creatures, and as he was the great monarch of heaven and earth, he might impose upon us terms of a covenant. 2. God made a covenant with Adam to bind him fast to him. As God bound himself to Adam, so Adam was bound to him by the covenant. What was the covenant? God commanded Adam not to eat of the tree of knowledge, but gave him leave to eat of all the other trees of the garden. God did not envy him any happiness, but said, Meddle not with this tree of knowledge, because he would try Adam's obedience. As King Pharaoh made Joseph chief ruler of his kingdom, and gave him a ring off his finger, and a chain of gold, but said he must not touch his throne, Genesis 41:40. In like manner, God dealt with Adam. He gave him a sparkling jewel, knowledge, and put upon him the garment of original righteousness. Only, said he, touch not the tree of knowledge, for that is aspiring after omniscience. Adam had power to keep this law. He had the copy of God's law written in his heart. This covenant of works had a promise annexed to it, and a threatening. 1. The promise was, do this and live. In case man had stood, it is probable he would not have died, but would have been translated to a better paradise. 2. The threatening, thou shalt die the death. Hebrew, in dying thou shalt die. That is, thou shalt die both a natural death and an eternal, unless some expedient be found out for thy restoration. Why did God give Adam this law, seeing he foresaw that Adam would transgress it? 1. It was Adam's fault that he did not keep the law. God gave him a stock of grace to trade with, but by his own neglect he failed. 2. Though God foresaw Adam would transgress, yet that was not a sufficient reason that no law should be given him. For, by the same reason, God should not have given his written word to men to be a rule of faith and manners, because he foresaw that some would not believe, and others would be profane. Shall laws not be made in the land, because some will break them? 3. Though God foresaw Adam would break the law, he knew how to turn it to greater good in sending Christ. The first covenant being broken, he knew how to establish a second and a better. 2. Concerning the first covenant, consider these 4 things. 1. The form of the first covenant in innocence was working. Do this and live. Working was the ground and condition of man's justification. Galatians 3:12. Not but that working is required in the covenant of grace, for we are bid to work out our salvation and be rich in works. But works in the covenant of grace are not required under the same notion as in the first covenant with Adam. Works are not required for the justification of our persons, but as an attestation of our love to God, not as the cause of our salvation, but as an evidence of our adoption. Works are required in the covenant of grace, not so much in our own strength as in the strength of another. It is God which worketh in you, Philippians 2:13. As the teacher guides the child's hand and helps him to form his letters, so that it is not so much the child's writing as the master's, so our obedience is not so much our working as the Spirit's co-working. 2. The covenant of works was very strict. God required of Adam and all mankind 1. Perfect obedience. Adam must do all things written in the book of the law and not fail, either in the matter or manner, Galatians 3:10. Adam was to live up to the whole breadth of the moral law and go exactly according to it, as a well-made dial goes with the sun. One sinful thought would have forfeited the covenant. 2. Personal obedience. Adam must not do his work by a proxy or have any surety bound for him, but it must be done in his own person. 3. Perpetual obedience. He must continue in all things written in the book of the law, Galatians 3:10. Thus it was very strict. There was no mercy in case of failure. 3. The covenant of works was not built upon a very firm basis, and therefore must needs leave men full of fears and doubts. The covenant of works rested upon the strength of man's inherent righteousness, which though in innocence was perfect, yet was subject to change. Adam was created holy, but mutable, having a power to stand and a power to fall. He had a stock of original righteousness to begin the world with, but he was not sure he would not break. He was his own pilot, and could steer right in the time of innocence, but he was not so secured, but that he might dash against the rock of temptation, and he and his posterity be shipwrecked, so that the covenant of works must needs leave jealousies and doubtings in Adam's heart, as he had no security given him, that he should not fall from that glorious state. 4. The covenant of works being broken by sin, man's condition was very deplorable and desperate. He was left in himself helpless. There was no place for repentance. The justice of God being offended set all the other attributes against him. When Adam lost his righteousness, he lost his anchor of hope and his crown. There was no way for relief, unless God would find out such a way as neither man nor angel could devise. Use 1. C. 1. The condescension of God, who was pleased to stoop so low as to make a covenant with us. For the God of glory to make a covenant with dust and ashes. For God to bind himself to us, to give us life in case of obedience. For him to enter into covenant with us was a sign of friendship and a royal act of favor. 2. See what a glorious condition man was in when God entered into covenant with him. He was placed in the garden of God, which for the pleasure of it was called paradise. Genesis 2:8. He had his choice of all the trees, one only excepted. He had all kinds of precious stones, pure metals, rich cedars. He was a king upon the throne, and all the creation did obeisance to him. As in Joseph's dream, all his brethren's sheaves bowed to his sheaf. Man, in innocence, had all kinds of pleasure that might ravish his senses with delight, and be as baits to allure him to serve and worship his Maker. He was full of holiness. Paradise was not more adorned with fruit than Adam's soul was with grace. He was the coin on which God had stamped his lively image. Light sparkled in his understanding, so that he was like an earthly angel, and his will and affections were full of order, tuning harmoniously to the will of God. Adam was a perfect pattern of sanctity. Adam had intimacy of communion with God, and conversed with him as a favorite with his prince. He knew God's mind, and had his heart. He not only enjoyed the light of the sun in paradise, but the light of God's countenance. This was Adam's condition when God entered into a covenant with him, but this did not long continue. For, man being in honor abideth not, lodged not for a night. Psalm 49:12. His teeth watered at the apple, and ever since it has made our eyes water. 3. Learn from Adam's fall, how unable we are to stand in our own strength. If Adam, in the state of integrity, did not stand, how unable are we now, when the lock of our original righteousness is cut? If purified nature did not stand, how then shall corrupt nature? We need more strength to uphold us than our own. 4. See in what a sad condition all unbelievers and impenitent persons are. As long as they continue in their sins, they continue under the curse, under the first covenant. Faith entitles us to the mercy of the second covenant, but while men are under the power of their sins, they are under the curse of the first covenant, and if they die in that condition, they are damned to eternity. 5. See the wonderful goodness of God, who was pleased, when man had forfeited the first covenant, to enter into a new covenant with him. Well may it be called foedus gratia, a covenant of grace. For it is bespangled with promises as the heaven with stars. When the angels, those glorious spirits, fell, God did not enter into a new covenant with them to be their God, but he let those golden vessels lie broken. Yet has he entered into a second covenant with us, better than the first. Hebrews 8:6. It is better because it is surer. It is made in Christ and cannot be reversed. Christ has engaged his strength to keep every believer. In the first covenant we had a posse stare, a power of standing. In the second we had a non-posse cadere, an impossibility of falling finally. 1 Peter 1:5. 6. Whosoever they are that look for righteousness and salvation by the power of their free will, or the inherent goodness of their nature, are by virtue of their merit, as the Socinians and Papists. They are all under the covenant of works. They do not submit to the righteousness of faith, therefore they are bound to keep the whole law, and in case of failure they are condemned. The covenant of grace is like a court of chancery, to relieve the sinner and help him who is cast by the first covenant. It says, "Believe in the Lord Jesus and be saved." But such as will stand upon their own inherent righteousness, free will, and merit, fall under the first covenant of works and are in a perishing state. Use 2. Let us labor by faith to get into the second covenant of grace, and then the curse of the first covenant will be taken away by Christ. If we once get to be heirs of the covenant of grace, we are in a better state than before. Adam stood on his own legs, and therefore he fell. We stand in the strength of Christ. Under the first covenant, the justice of God, as an avenger of blood, pursues us. But if we get into the second covenant, we are in the city of refuge, we are safe, and the justice of God is pacified towards us. Question 14. What is sin? A. Sin is any want of conformity to the law of God or transgression of it. 1. Sin is the transgression of the law, 1 John 3:4, of sin in general. 1. Sin is a violation or a transgression. The Latin word transgredere, to transgress, signifies to go beyond one's bounds. The moral law is to keep us within the bounds of duty. Sin is going beyond our bounds. 2. The law of God is not the law of an inferior prince, but of Jehovah, who gives laws as well to angels as men. It is a law that is just and holy and good. Romans 7:12. It is just. There is nothing in it unequal. Holy, nothing in it impure. Good, nothing in it prejudicial. So that there is no reason to break this law, no more than for a beast that is in a fat pasture to break over the hedge, or to leap into a barren heath or quagmire. I shall show what a heinous and execrable thing sin is. It is malorum coluvis, the complication of all evil. It is the spirits of mischief distilled. The scripture calls it the accursed thing, Joshua 7:13. It is compared to the venom of serpents and the stench of sepulchres. The apostle uses this expression of sin, out of measure sinful, Romans 7:13, or, as it is in the Greek, hyperbolically sinful. The devil would paint sin with the vermilion color of pleasure and profit, that he may make it look fair. But I shall pull off the paint that you may see its ugly face. We are apt to have slight thoughts of sin, and say to it, as Lot of Zoar, "Is it not a little one?" Genesis 19:20. But that you may see how great an evil sin is, consider these four things. 1. The origin of sin, from whence it comes. It fetches its pedigree from hell. Sin is of the devil. He that committeth sin is of the devil. 1 John 3:8. Satan was the first actor of sin and the first tempter to sin. Sin is the devil's firstborn. 2. Sin is evil in the nature of it. 1. It is a defiling thing. Sin is not only a defection, but a pollution. It is to the soul as rust is to gold, as a stain to beauty. It makes the soul red with guilt and black with filth. Sin in Scripture is compared to a menstruous cloth, Isaiah 30 verse 22, and to a plague sore, 1 Kings 8:38. Joshua's filthy garments, in which he stood before the angel, were nothing but a type and hieroglyphic of sin, Zechariah 3:3. Sin has blotted God's image and stained the orient brightness of the soul. It makes God loathe a sinner, Zechariah 11:8, and when a sinner sees his sin, he loathes himself, Ezekiel 20:42. Sin drops poison on our holy things. It infects our prayers. The high priest was to make atonement for sin on the altar, to typify that our holiest services need Christ to make an atonement for them, Exodus 29:36. Duties of religion in themselves are good, but sin corrupts them, as the purest water is polluted by running through muddy ground. If the leper under the law had touched the altar would not have cleansed him, but he would have defiled the altar. The apostle calls sin filthiness of flesh and spirit, 2 Corinthians 7:1. Sin stamps the devil's image on a man. Malice is the devil's eye, hypocrisy his cloven foot. It turns a man into a devil. Have not I chosen you 12? And one of you is a devil? John 6:70. 2. Sin is grieving God's Spirit. Grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, Ephesians 4:30. To grieve is more than to anger. How can the Spirit be said to be grieved? For seeing he is God, he cannot be subject to any passion. This is spoken metaphorically. Sin is said to grieve the Spirit because it is an injury offered to the Spirit, and he takes it unkindly and, as it were, lays it to heart. And is it not much thus to grieve the Spirit? The Holy Spirit descended in the likeness of a dove, and sin makes this blessed dove mourn. Were it only an angel, we should not grieve him, much less the Spirit of God. Is it not sad to grieve our Comforter? 3. Sin is an act of contumacy against God, a walking antipodes to heaven. If you will walk contrary to me, Leviticus 26:27. A sinner tramples upon God's law, crosses his will, does all he can to affront, yea, to spite God. The Hebrew word for sin, pasha, signifies rebellion. There is the heart of a rebel in every sin. We will do whatsoever proceedeth out of our own mouth, to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, Jeremiah 44:19. Sin strikes at the very deity, peccatum est decidium. Sin is God's would-be murderer. Sin would not only unthrone God, but ungod him. If the sinner could help it, God would no longer be God. 4. Sin is an act of disingenuity and unkindness. God feeds the sinner, keeps off evils from him, bemiracles him with mercy, But the sinner not only forgets God's mercies, but abuses them. He is the worst for mercy, like Absalom, who, as soon as David had kissed him and taken him into favor, plotted treason against him. 2 Samuel 15:10. Like the mule who kicks the dam after she has given it milk, is this thy kindness to thy friend? 2 Samuel 16:17. God may upbraid the sinner. I have given thee, he may say, thy health, strength, and estate, but thou requitest me evil for good. Thou woundest me with my own mercies. Is this thy kindness to thy friend? Did I give thee life to sin? Did I give thee wages to serve the devil? 5. Sin is a disease. The whole head is sick. Isaiah 1:5. Some are sick of pride, others of lust, others of envy. Sin has distempered the intellectual part. It is a leprosy in the head. It has poisoned the vitals. Their conscience is defiled. Titus 1:15. It is with a sinner as with a sick patient. His palate is distempered. The sweetest things taste bitter to him. The word which is sweeter than the honeycomb, Psalm 19:90, tastes bitter to him. He puts sweet for bitter, Isaiah 5:20. This is a disease, and nothing can cure this disease but the blood of the physician. 6. Sin is an irrational thing. It makes a man act not only wickedly, but foolishly. It is absurd and irrational to prefer the less before the greater, the pleasures of life before the rivers of pleasures at God's right hand forevermore. Is it not irrational to lose heaven for the satisfying or indulging of lust? As Lysimachus, who, for a draught of water, lost a kingdom. Is it not irrational to gratify an enemy? In sin we do so. When lust or rash anger burns in the soul, Satan warms himself at this fire. Men's sins feast the devil. 7. Sin is a painful thing. It costs men much labor to pursue their sins. How do they tire themselves in doing the devil's drudgery? They weary themselves to commit iniquity. Jeremiah 9:5. What pains did Judas take to bring about his treason? He goes to the high priest, and then after to the band of soldiers, and then back again to the garden. Chrysostom says, virtue is easier than vice. It is more pains to some to follow their sins than to others to worship their God. While the sinner travails with his sin, in sorrow he brings forth, which is called serving divers lusts, Titus 3:3. Not in joy, but serve. Why so? Because not only of the slavery in sin, but the hard labor. It is serving divers lusts. Many a man goes to hell in the sweat of his brow. 8. Sin is the only thing God has an antipathy against. God does not hate a man because he is poor or despised in the world, as you do not hate your friend because he is sick. But that which draws forth the keenness of God's hatred is sin. Oh, do not this abominable thing that I hate. Jeremiah 44:4. And sure, if the sinner dies under God's hatred, he cannot be admitted into the celestial mansions. Will God let the man live with him whom he hates? God will never lay a viper in his bosom. The feathers of the eagle will not mix with the feathers of other fowls, so God will not mix and incorporate with a sinner. Till sin be removed, there is no coming where God is. 3. See the evil of sin in the price paid for it. It cost the blood of God to expiate it. O man, says Augustine, consider the greatness of thy sin by the greatness of the price paid for sin. All the princes on earth or angels in heaven could not satisfy for sin, only Christ. Nay, Christ's active obedience was not enough to make atonement for sin, but he must suffer upon the cross, for without blood is no remission. Hebrews 9:22. Oh, what an accursed thing is sin, that Christ should die for it. The evil of sin is not so much seen in that 1,000 are damned for it, as that Christ died for it. 4. Sin is evil in its effects. 1. Sin has degraded us of our honor. Reuben by incest lost his dignity, and though he was the firstborn, he could not excel. Genesis 49:4. God made us in his own image, a little lower than the angels, but sin has debased us. Before Adam sinned, he was like a herald that has his coat of arms upon him. All reverence him, because he carries the king's coat of arms. But let this coat be pulled off, and he is despised. No man regards him. Sin has done this. It has plucked off our coat of innocence, and now it has debased us and turned our glory into shame. And there shall stand up a vile person. Daniel 11:21. This was spoken of Antiochus Epiphanes, who was a king, and his name signifies illustrious. Yet sin degraded him. He was a vile person. 2. Sin disquiets the peace of the soul. Whatever defiles, disturbs. As poison tortures the bowels, corrupts the blood, so sin does the soul. Isaiah 57:21. Sin breeds a trembling at the heart. It creates fears, and there is torment in fear. 1 John 4:18. Sin makes sad convulsions in the conscience. Judas was so terrified with guilt and horror that he hanged himself to quiet his conscience. And is not he like to be ill-cured, that throws himself into hell for ease? Sin produces all temporal evil. Jerusalem has grievously sinned, therefore she is removed. Lamentations 1:8. It is the Trojan horse that has sword and famine and pestilence in its belly. Sin is a coal that not only blacks, but burns. Sin creates all our troubles. It puts gravel into our bread, wormwood in our cup. Sin rots the name, consumes the estate, buries relations. Sin shoots the flying roll of God's curses into a family and kingdom. Zechariah 5:4. It is reported of Phachus that having built a wall of mighty strength about his city, there was a voice heard, "Sin is within the city, and that will throw down the wall." 4. Sin unrepented of brings final damnation. The canker that breeds in the rose is the cause of its perishing, and corruptions that breed in men's souls are the cause of their damning. Sin, without repentance, brings the second death. That is, mors sin morte. Bernard, a death always dying. Revelation 20:14. Sin's pleasure will turn to sorrow at last. Like the book the prophet did eat, sweet in the mouth, but bitter in the belly. Ezekiel 3:3. Sin brings the wrath of God, and what bucket or engines can quench that fire, where the worm never dies, and the fire is not quenched? Mark 9:44. Use 1. See how deadly and evil sin is, and how strange is it that anyone should love it. How long will ye love vanity? Psalm 4:2. Who look to other gods and love flagons of wine. Hosea 3:1. Sin is a dish men cannot forbear, though it makes them sick. Who would pour rose water into a kennel? What pity is it so sweet an affection as love should be poured upon so filthy a thing as sin? Sin brings a sting in the conscience, a curse in the estate, yet men love it. A sinner is the greatest self-denier. For his sin he will deny himself a part in heaven. Use 2. Do anything rather than sin. Oh, hate sin. There is more evil in the least sin than in the greatest bodily evils that can befall us. The ermine rather chooses to die than defile her beautiful skin. There is more evil in a drop of sin than in a sea of affliction. Affliction is but like a rent in a coat, sin a prick at the heart. In affliction there is a liquid malice, some good. In this lion there is some honey to be found. It is good for me that I was afflicted. Psalm 119, 71. Uta est animus si en hac ere mundi flagellis trituretur corpus. Augustine. Affliction is God's flail to thresh off our husk, not to consume, but to refine. There is no good in sin. It is the spirit and quintessence of evil. Sin is worse than hell, for the pains of hell are a burden to the creature only, but sin is a burden to God. I am pressed under your iniquities, as a cart is pressed under the sheaves. Amos 2:13. Use 3. Is sin so great an evil? Then how thankful should you be to God if he has taken away your sin? I have caused thy iniquity to pass from thee. Zechariah 3:4. If you had a disease on your body, plague or dropsy, how thankful would you be to have it taken away? Much more to have sin taken away. God takes away the guilt of sin by pardoning grace, and the power of sin by mortifying grace. Oh, be thankful that this sickness is not unto death, that God has changed your nature, and, by grafting you into Christ, made you partake of the sweetness of that olive, that sin, though it live, does not reign, but the elder serves the younger. Sin, the elder, serves grace, the younger. Part 2. Adam's sin. Question 15. What was the sin whereby our first parents fell from the estate wherein they were created? A. That sin was eating the forbidden fruit. She took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also to her husband. Genesis 3:6. Here is implied 1. That our first parents fell from their estate of innocence. 2. The sin by which they fell was eating the forbidden fruit. 1. Our first parents fell from their glorious state of innocence. God made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. Ecclesiastes 7:29. Adam was perfectly holy. He had rectitude of mind and liberty of will to good. But his head ached till he had invented his own and our death. He sought out many inventions. 1. His fall was voluntary. He had a passe non peccare, a power not to fall. Free will was a sufficient shield to repel temptation. The devil could not have forced him unless he had given his consent. Satan was only a suitor to woo, not a king to compel. But Adam gave away his own power, and suffered himself to be decoyed into sin, like a young gallant, who at one throw loses a fair lordship. Adam had a fair lordship. He was Lord of the world. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth. Genesis 1:28. But he lost all at one throw. Soon as he sinned, he forfeited paradise. 2. Adam's fall was sudden. He did not long continue in his royal majesty. How long did Adam continue in paradise before he fell? Tostatus says he fell the next day. Pererius says he fell the 8th day after his creation. The most probable and received opinion is that he fell the very same day in which he was created. So Irenaeus, Cyril, Epiphanius, and many others. The reasons which incline me to believe so are: 1. It is said Satan was a murderer from the beginning. John 8:44. Now, whom did he murder? Not the blessed angels. He could not reach them, nor the cursed angels, for they had before destroyed themselves. How then was Satan a murderer from the beginning? As soon as Satan fell, he began to tempt mankind to sin. This was a murdering temptation, by which it appears Adam did not stay long in paradise. Soon after his creation the devil set upon him, and murdered him by his temptation. 2. Adam had not yet eaten of the tree of life. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and eat, the Lord sent him forth of the garden. Genesis 3:22 and 23. This tree of life, being one of the choicest fruits in the garden, and being placed in the midst of paradise, it is very likely Adam would have eaten of this tree of life one of the first, had not the serpent beguiled him with the tree of knowledge. So that I conclude, Adam fell the very day of his creation, because he had not tasted the tree of life, that tree that was most in his eye, and had such delicious fruit growing upon it. 3. Man being in honor, abideth not. Psalm 49:12. The rabbis read it thus: Adam being in honor, lodged not one night. The Hebrew word for abide signifies to stay or lodge all night. Adam then, it seems, did not take up one night's lodging in paradise. Use 1. From Adam's sudden fall, learn the weakness of human nature. Adam, in a state of integrity, quickly made a defection from God. He soon lost the robe of innocence and the glory of paradise. If our nature was thus weak when it was at the best, what is it now when it is at the worst? If Adam did not stand when he was perfectly righteous, how unable are we to stand when sin has cut the lock of our original righteousness? If purified nature did not stand, how shall corrupt nature? If Adam, in a few hours, sinned himself out of paradise, how quickly would we sin ourselves into hell if we were not kept by a greater power than our own? But God puts underneath his everlasting arms. Deuteronomy 33:27. Use 2. From Adam's sudden fall, learn how sad it is for a man to be left to himself. Adam being left to himself, fell. Oh then, what will become of us? How soon fall? If God should leave us to ourselves. A man without God's grace, left to himself, is like a ship in a storm, without pilot or anchor, and is ready to dash upon every rock. Make this prayer to God: Lord, do not leave me to myself. If Adam fell so soon who had strength, how soon shall I fall who have no strength? Oh, urge God with his hand and seal. My strength shall be made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. 2. The sin by which our first parents fell was eating the forbidden fruit, where, consider 2 things. 1. The occasion of it was the serpent's temptation. The devil crept into the serpent, and spake in the serpent, as the angel in Balaam's ass, where, consider. 1. The subtlety of Satan's temptation. His wiles are worse than his darts. Satan's subtlety in tempting. 1. He dealt all along as an impostor. He ushered in his temptation by lies. First lie: You shall not surely die. Genesis 3:3. Second lie: That God did envy our first parents their happiness. God knows that in the day ye eat, your eyes shall be opened. Verse 5. It is God's envying your felicity, that he forbids you this tree. Third lie: That they should be thereby made like unto God. You shall be as gods. Verse 5. Here was his subtlety in tempting. The devil was first a liar, then a murderer. 2. In that he sat upon our first parents so quickly, before they were confirmed in their obedience. The angels in heaven are fully confirmed in holiness. They are called stars of the morning, Job 38:7, and they are fixed stars. But our first parents were not confirmed in their obedience. They were not fixed in their orb of holiness. Though they had a possibility of standing, they had not an impossibility of falling. They were holy, but mutable. There was Satan's subtlety in tempting our first parents before they were confirmed in their obedience. 3. His subtlety in tempting was that he set upon Eve first because he thought she was less able to resist. Satan broke over the hedge where it was weakest. He knew he could more easily insinuate and wind himself into her by a temptation. An expert soldier, when about to storm or enter a castle, observes warily where there is a breach, or how he may enter with more facility. So did Satan the weaker vessel. He tempted Eve first because he knew if once he could prevail with her, she would easily draw her husband. Thus the devil handed over a temptation to Job by his wife. Curse God and die, Job 2:9. Agrippina poisoned the emperor Commodus with wine in a perfumed cup. The cup being perfumed and given him by his wife, it was the less suspected. Satan knew a temptation coming to Adam from his wife would be more prevailing and would be less suspected. Oh, bitter! Sometimes relations prove temptations. A wife may be a snare when she dissuades her husband from doing his duty or entices him to evil. Ahab sold himself to work wickedness, whom his wife Jezebel stirred up. 1 Kings 21:15. She blew the coals and made his sin flame out the more. Satan's subtlety was in tempting Adam by his wife. He thought she would draw him to sin. 4. Satan's subtlety in tempting was in assaulting Eve's faith. He would persuade her that God had not spoken truth. Ye shall not surely die, Genesis 3:3. This was Satan's masterpiece to weaken her faith. When he had shaken that, and had brought her once to distrust, then she yielded, she presently put forth her hand to evil. 2. Satan's cruelty in tempting. Soon as Adam was invested in all his glory, the devil cruelly, as it were on the day of Adam's coronation, would dethrone him and bring him and all his posterity under a curse. See how little love Satan has to mankind? He has an implacable antipathy against us, and antipathies can never be reconciled. So much for the occasion of Adam's sin, or his being tempted by the serpent. 2. The sin itself, eating the forbidden fruit. This was very heinous, and that appears 3 ways. 1. In respect of the person that committed it. 2. The aggravation of the sin. 3. The dreadfulness of the effect. 1. It was very heinous in respect of the person that committed it. Adam had excellent and noble endowments. He was illumined with knowledge, embellished with holiness. He knew his duty, and it was as easy to him to obey God's command as to know it. He might have chosen whether he would sin or no, yet he willfully did eat of the forbidden tree. 2. The aggravation of Adam's sin. Wherein did it appear to be so great? It was but the seizing of an apple. Was it such a great matter to pluck an apple? It was against an infinite God. It was a voluminous sin. There were many twisted together in it. As Cicero says of parricide, he who is guilty of it, he commits many sins in one. So there were many sins in this one sin of Adam. It was a big-bellied sin, a chain with many links. 10 sins were in it. 1. Incredulity. Our first parents did not believe what God had spoken was truth. God said, "They shall die the death in the day they eat of that tree." They believed not that they should die. They could not be persuaded that such fair fruit had death at the door. Thus, by unbelief they made God a liar. Nay, which was worse, they believed the devil rather than God. 2. Unthankfulness, which is the epitome of all sin. Adam's sin was committed in the midst of paradise. God had enriched him with variety of mercies. He had stamped his own image upon him. He had made him Lord of the world, gave him of all the trees of the garden to eat, only one only excepted, and now to take of that tree. This was high ingratitude. It was like the dye to the wool, which makes it crimson. When Adam's eyes were opened, and he saw what he had done, well might he be ashamed and hide himself. How could he who sinned in the midst of paradise look God in the face without blushing? 3. In Adam's sin was discontent. Had he not been discontented, he would never have sought to have altered his condition. Adam, one would think, had enough. He differed but little from the angels. He had the robe of innocence to clothe him, and the glory of paradise to crown him. Yet he was not content. He would have more. He would be above the ordinary rank of creatures. How wide was Adam's heart, that a whole world could not fill it. 4. Pride, in that he would be like God. This worm, that was but newly crept out of the dust, now aspired after deity. Ye shall be as gods, said Satan, and Adam hoped to have been so indeed. He supposed the tree of knowledge would have anointed his eyes and made him omniscient. But, by climbing too high, he got a fall. 5. Disobedience. God said, Thou shalt not eat of the tree, but he would eat of it, though it cost him his life. Disobedience is a sin against equity. It is right we should serve him from whom we have our subsistence. God gave Adam his allowance, therefore it was but right he should give God his allegiance. How could God endure to see his laws trampled on before his face? This made him place a flaming sword at the end of the garden. 6. Curiosity. He meddled with that which was out of his sphere, and did not belong to him. God smote the men of Bethshemesh for looking into the ark. 1 Samuel 6:19. Adam would be prying into God's secrets and tasting what was forbidden. 7. Wantonness. Though Adam had a choice of all the other trees, yet his palate grew wanton, and he must have this tree. Like Israel, God sent them manna, angels' food, but they had a hankering after quails. It was not enough that God supplied their wants, unless he should satisfy their lusts. Adam had not only for necessity, but for delight, yet his wanton palate lusted after forbidden fruit. 8. Sacrilege. The tree of knowledge was none of Adam's, yet he took of it, and did sacrilegiously rob God of his due. It was counted a great crime in Harpelus to rob the temple and steal the silver vessels. So it was in Adam to steal fruit from that tree which God had peculiarly enclosed for himself. Sacrilege is double theft. 9. Murder. Adam was a public person, and all his posterity were involved and wrapped up in him, and he, by sinning, at once destroyed all his posterity, if free grace did not interpose. If Abel's blood cried so loud in God's ears, the voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground, Genesis 4:10, how loud did the blood of all Adam's posterity cry against him for vengeance. 10. Presumption. Adam presumed of God's mercy. He blessed himself, saying he should have peace. He thought, though he did transgress, he should not die, that God would sooner reverse his decree than punish him. This was great presumption. What a heinous sin was Adam's breach of covenant. One sin may have many sins in it. We are apt to have slight thoughts of sin and say it is but a little one. How many sins were in Adam's sin? Oh, take heed of any sin. As in one volume there may be many works bound up, so there may be many sins in one sin. 3. The dreadfulness of the effect. It has corrupted man's nature. How rank is that poison a drop whereof could poison a whole sea, and how deadly is that sin of Adam that could poison all mankind and bring a curse upon them, till it be taken away by him who was made a curse for us. Part 3. Original Sin. Question 16. Did all mankind fall in Adam's first transgression? Answer. The covenant being made with Adam, not only for himself, but for his posterity, all mankind descending from him, by ordinary generation, sinned in him, and fell with him in his first transgression. By one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. Romans 5:12. Adam being a representative person, while he stood, we stood. When he fell, we fell. We sinned in Adam, so it is in the text, in whom all have sinned. Adam was the head of mankind, and being guilty, we are guilty as the children of a traitor have their blood stained. All of us, says Augustine, sinned in Adam because we were part of Adam. If when Adam fell, all mankind fell with him, why, when one angel fell, did not all fall? The case is not the same. The angels had no relation to one another. They are called morning stars. The stars have no dependence one upon another. But it was otherwise with us. We were in Adam's loins. As a child is a branch of the parent, we were part of Adam. Therefore, when he sinned, we sinned. How is Adam's sin made ours? 1. By imputation. The Pelagians of old held that Adam's transgression is hurtful to posterity by imitation only, not by imputation. But the text, in whom all have sinned, confutes that. 2. Adam's sin is ours by propagation. Not only is the guilt of Adam's sin imputed to us, but the depravity and corruption of his nature is transmitted to us, as poison is carried from the fountain to the cistern. This is that which we call original sin. In sin did my mother conceive me, Psalm 51:5. Adam's leprosy cleaves to us, as Naaman's leprosy did to Gehazi, 2 Kings 5:27. This original concupiscence is called 1. The old man, Ephesians 4:22. It is said to be the old man, not that it is weak, as old men are, but for its long standing, and for its deformity. In old age, the fair blossoms of beauty fall. So original sin is the old man, because it has withered our beauty, and made us deformed in God's eye. 2. Original concupiscence is called the law of sin, Romans 7:25. Original sin has the power of a law which binds the subject to allegiance. Men must needs do what sin will have them, when they have both the love of sin to draw them and the law of sin to force them. 1. In original sin there is something privative and something positive. 1. Something privative. The lack of that righteousness which should be ours. We have lost that excellent, quintessential frame of soul which once we had. Sin has cut the lock of original purity where our strength lay. 2. Something positive. Original sin has contaminated and defiled our virgin nature. It was death among the Romans to poison the springs. Original sin has poisoned the spring of our nature. It has turned beauty into leprosy. It has turned the azure brightness of our souls into midnight darkness. Original sin has become connatural to us. A man by nature cannot but sin, though there were no devil to tempt, no bad examples to imitate, yet there is such an innate principle in him that he cannot forbear sinning. 2 Peter 2:14. A peccato cessare nesciunt, who cannot cease to sin, as a horse that is lame cannot go without halting. In original sin there is 1. An aversion from good. Man has a desire to be happy, yet opposes that which should promote his happiness. He has a disgust of holiness. He hates to be reformed. Since we fell from God, we have no mind to return to him. 2. A propensity to evil. If, as the Pelagians say, there is so much goodness in us since the fall, why is there not as much natural proneness to good as there is to evil? Our experience tells us that the natural bias of the soul is to that which is bad. The very heathens by the light of nature saw this. Heraclius, the philosopher, said, "It is grafted in us by nature to sin. Men roll sin as honey under their tongue. They drink iniquity as water." Job 15:16. Like a hydropsical person that thirsts for drink and is not satisfied. They have a kind of drought on them, they thirst for sin. Though they are tired out in committing sin, yet they sin. Ephesians 4:19. They weary themselves to commit iniquity, as a man that follows his game, while he is weary, yet delights in it, and cannot leave it off. Jeremiah 9:5. Though God has set so many flaming swords in the way to stop men in their sin, yet they go on in it, which all shows what a strong appetite they have to the forbidden fruit. 2. That we may further see the nature of original sin, consider 1. The universality of it. It has, as poison, diffused itself into all the parts and powers of the soul. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart is faint. Isaiah 1:5. Like a sick patient that has no part sound, his liver is swelled, his feet are gangrened, his lungs are perished. Such infected, gangrene souls have we, till Christ, who has made a medicine of his blood, cures us. 1. Original sin has depraved the intellectual part. As in the creation, darkness was upon the face of the deep, Genesis 1:2, so it is with the understanding. Darkness is upon the face of this deep. As there is salt in every drop of the sea, bitterness in every branch of wormwood, so there is sin in every faculty. The mind is darkened. We know little of God. Ever since Adam did eat of the tree of knowledge, and his eyes were opened, we lost our eyesight. Besides ignorance in the mind, there is error and mistake. We do not judge rightly of things. We put bitter for sweet, and sweet for bitter. Isaiah 5:20. Besides this, there is much pride, superciliousness, and prejudice, and many fleshly reasonings. How long shall thy vain thoughts lodge within thee? Jeremiah 4:14. 2. Original sin has defiled the heart. The heart is deadly wicked. Jeremiah 17:9. It is a lesser hell. In the heart are legions of lusts, obdurateness, infidelity, hypocrisy, sinful estuations. It boils as the sea with passion and revenge. Madness is in their heart while they live. Ecclesiastes 9:3. The heart is the devil's shop or workhouse where all mischief is framed. 3. The will. Contumacy is the seat of rebellion. The sinner crosses God's will to fulfill his own. We will burn incense to the Queen of Heaven. Jeremiah 44:17. There is a rooted enmity in the will against holiness. It is like an iron sinew. It refuses to bend to God. Where is then the freedom of the will, when it is so full not only of indisposition, but opposition to what is spiritual? 4. The affections. These, as the strings of a viol, are out of tune. They are the lesser wills, which are strongly carried by the will, the master will. Our affections are set on wrong objects. Our love is set on sin, our joy on the creature. Our affections are naturally as a sick man's appetite, who desires things which are noxious and hurtful to him. He calls for wine in a fever. So we have impure lustings instead of holy longings. 2. The adhesion of original sin. It cleaves to us as blackness to the skin of the Ethiopian, so that we cannot get rid of it. Paul shook off the viper on his hand, but we cannot shake off this inbred corruption. It may be compared to a wild fig tree growing on a wall, the roots of which are pulled up, and yet there are some fibers of it in the joints of the stonework, which will not be eradicated, but will sprout forth till the wall be pulled in pieces. Original concupiscence comes not as a lodger for a night, but as an indweller. Sin which dwelleth in me, Romans 7:17. It is an evil spirit that haunts us wheresoever we go. The Canaanite would dwell in that land, Joshua 17:12. 3. Original sin retards and hinders us in the exercise of God's worship. Whence is all that dullness and deadness in religion? It is the fruit of original sin. This it is that rocks us asleep in duty. The good that I would, I do not. Romans 7:19. Sin is compared to a weight. Hebrews 12:1. A man that has weights tied to his legs cannot run fast. It is like that fish Pliny speaks of, a sea lamprey, that cleaves to the keel of the ship and hinders its progress when it is under sail. 4. Original sin, though latent in the soul, and as a spring which runs underground, often breaks forth unexpectedly. Christian, thou canst not believe that evil which is in thy heart, and which will break forth suddenly, if God should leave thee. Is thy servant a dog, that he should do this great thing? 2 Kings 8:13. Hazael could not believe he had such a root of bitterness in his heart, that he should rip up the women with child. Is thy servant a dog? Yes, and worse than a dog, when that original corruption within is stirred up. If one had come to Peter and said, Peter, within a few hours thou wilt deny Christ, he would have said, Is thy servant a dog? But alas, Peter did not know his own heart, nor how far that corruption within would prevail upon him. The sea may be calm and look clear, but when the wind blows, how it rages and foams. So that now thy heart seems good, yet, when temptation blows, how may original sin discover itself, making thee foam with lust and passion? Who would have thought to have found adultery in David, and drunkenness in Noah, and cursing in Job? If God leaves a man to himself, how suddenly and scandalously may original sin break forth in the holiest men on the earth. 5. Original sin mixes and incorporates itself with our duties and graces. 1. With our duties. As the hand which is paralytic or palsied cannot move without shaking, as wanting some inward strength, so we cannot do any holy action without sinning, as wanting a principle of original righteousness. As whatever the leper touched became unclean, such a leprosy is original sin. It defiles our prayers and tears. We cannot write without blotting. Though I do not say that the holy duties and good works of the regenerate are sins, for that were to reproach the Spirit of Christ, by which they are wrought, yet this I say, that the best works of the godly have sin cleaving to them. Christ's blood alone makes atonement for our holy things. 2. With our graces. There is some unbelief mixed with faith, lukewarmness with zeal, pride with humility. As bad lungs cause an asthma or shortness of breath, so original corruption has infected our hearts, so that our graces breathe very faintly. 6. Original sin is a vigorous, active principle within us. It does not lie still, but is ever exciting and stirring us up to evil. It is an inmate very unquiet. What I hate, that do I. Romans 7:15. How came Paul to do so? Original sin irritated and stirred him up to it. Original sin is like quicksilver, always in motion. When we are asleep, sin is awake in the fancy. Original sin sets the head plotting evil and the hands working it. It has in it a principle of restlessness, not of tranquility. It is like the pulse, ever beating. Original sin is the cause of all actual sin. It is the kindling wood of sin. It is the womb in which all actual sins are conceived. Hence come murders, adulteries, rapines. Though actual sins may be more scandalous, yet original sin is more heinous. The cause is more than the effect. 8. It is not perfectly cured in this life. Though grace does subdue sin, yet it does not wholly remove it. Though we are like Christ, having the first fruits of the Spirit, yet we are unlike him, having the remainders of the flesh. There are two nations in the womb. Original sin is like that tree in Daniel 4:23, though the branches of it were hewn down, and the main body of it, yet the stumps and root of the tree were left. Though the spirit be still weakening and hewing down sin in the godly, yet the stump of original sin is left. It is a seed that will not, in this life, be dried up. But why does God leave original corruption in us after regeneration? He could free us from it if he pleased. 1. He does it to show the power of his grace in the weakest believer. Grace shall prevail against a torrent of corruption. Whence is this? The corruption is ours, but the grace is God's. 2. God leaves original corruption to make us long after heaven, where there shall be no sin to defile, no devil to tempt. When Elias was taken up to heaven, his mantle dropped off. So, when the angels shall carry us up to heaven, this mantle of sin shall drop off. We shall never more complain of an aching head or an unbelieving heart. Use 1. If original sin be propagated to us, and will be inherent in us while we live here, it confutes the libertines and Quakers who say they are without sin. They hold perfection. They show much pride and ignorance, but we see the seeds of original sin remain in the best. There is not a just man lives and sins not, Ecclesiastes 7:20. And Paul complained of a body of death, Romans 7:24. Though grace purifies nature, it does not perfect it. But does not the apostle say of believers that their old man is crucified, Romans 6:6, and they are dead to sin, Romans 6:11? They are dead, 1. Spiritually. They are dead as to the ritus, the guilt of it, and as to the regnum, the power of it. The love of sin is crucified. 2. They are dead to sin legally. As a man that is sentenced to death is dead in law, so they are legally dead to sin. There is a sentence of death gone out against sin. It shall die and drop into the grave. But at the present, sin has its life lengthened out. Nothing but the death of the body can quite free us from the body of this death. Use 2. Let us lay to heart original sin and be deeply humbled for it. It cleaves to us as a disease. It is an active principle in us, stirring us up to evil. Original sin is worse than all actual sin. The fountain is more than the stream. Some think, as long as they are civil, they are well enough. But the nature is poisoned. A river may have fair streams, but vermin at the bottom. Thou carriest a hell about thee, thou canst do nothing, but thou defilest it. Thy heart, like muddy ground, defiles the purest water that runs through it. Nay, though thou art regenerate, there is much of the old man in the new man. Oh, how should original sin humble us? This is one reason God has left original sin in us, because he would have it as a thorn in our side to humble us. As the bishop of Alexandria, after the people had embraced Christianity, destroyed all their idols but one, that the sight of that one idol might make them loathe themselves for their former idolatry. So God leaves original sin to pull down the plumes of pride. Under our silver wings of grace are black feet. Use 3. Let the sense of this make us daily look up to heaven for help. Beg Christ's blood to wash away the guilt of sin, and his Spirit to mortify the power of it. Beg further degrees of grace. Though grace cannot make sin not to be, yet it makes it not to reign. Though grace cannot expel sin, it can repel it. And for our comfort, where grace makes a combat with sin, death shall make a conquest. Use 4. Let original sin make us walk with continual jealousy and watchfulness over our hearts. The sin of our nature is like a sleeping lion. The least thing that awakens it makes it rage. Though the sin of our nature seems quiet, and lies as fire hid under the embers, yet if it be a little stirred and blown up by a temptation, how quickly may it flame forth into scandalous evils. Therefore we need always to walk watchfully. I say to you all, watch. Mark 13:37. A wandering heart needs a watchful eye. Part 4. Man's Misery by the Fall. Question 19. What is the misery of that estate whereinto man fell? Answer. All mankind by their fall lost communion with God, are under his wrath and curse, and so made liable to all the miseries in this life, to death itself, and to the pains of hell forever. And were by nature children of wrath, Ephesians 2:3. Adam left an unhappy portion to his posterity, sin and misery. Having considered the first of these, original sin, we shall now advert to the misery of that state. In the first, we have seen mankind offending. In the second, we shall see him suffering. The misery ensuing from original sin is twofold. 1. Privative. By this first, hereditary sin we have lost communion with God. Adam was God's familiar, his favorite. But sin has put us all out of favor. When we lost God's image, we lost his acquaintance. God's banishing Adam out of paradise hieroglyphically showed how sin has banished us out of God's love and favor. 2. Positive. In 4 things. 1. Under the power of Satan. 2. Heirs of God's wrath. 3. Subject to all the miseries of this life. 4. Exposed to hell and damnation. 1. The first misery is that by nature we are under the power of Satan, who is called the prince of the power of the air, Ephesians 2:2. Before the fall, man was a free denizen, now a slave, before a king on the throne, now in fetters. And whom is man enslaved to? To one that is a hater of him. This was an aggravation of Israel's servitude. They that hated them ruled over them. Psalm 106:41. By sin we are enslaved to Satan, who is a hater of mankind, and writes all his laws in blood. Sinners before conversion are under Satan's command, as the ass at the command of the driver, so he does all the devil's drudgery. No sooner Satan tempts, but he obeys. As the ship is at the command of the pilot, who steers it which way he will, so is the sinner at the command of Satan, and he ever steers the ship into hell's mouth. The devil rules all the powers and faculties of a sinner. 1. He rules the understanding. He blinds men with ignorance, and then rules them, as the Philistines first put out Samson's eyes, and then bound him. Satan can do what he will with an ignorant man. Because he does not see the error of his way, the devil can lead him into any sin. You may lead a blind man any whither. Every sin is founded upon ignorance. 2. Satan rules the will. Though he cannot force the will, yet he can, by temptation, draw it. The lusts of your father ye will do, John 8:44. He has got your hearts, and him ye will obey. We will burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, Jeremiah 44:17. When the devil spurs a sinner by a temptation, he will overhedge and ditch break all God's laws, that he may obey Satan. Where then is free will, when Satan has such power over the will? His lust ye will do. There's not any member of the body, but is at the devil's service. The head to plot sin, the hands to work it, the feet to run the devil's errand. Cicero, slavery is hateful to a noble spirit. Satan is the worst tyrant, the cruelty of a cannibal, or Nero, is nothing to his. Other tyrants do but rule over the bodies, he over the conscience. Other tyrants have some pity on their slaves, though they work in the galley, they give them meat. Let them have hours for rest. But Satan is a merciless tyrant. He lets them have no rest. What pains did Judas take? The devil would let him have no rest till he had betrayed Christ, and afterwards imbrued his hands in his own blood. Use 1. See here our misery by original sin, enslaved to Satan, Ephesians 2:2. Satan is said to work effectually in the children of disobedience. What a sad plague is it for a sinner to be at the will of the devil! Just like a slave, if the Turks bid him dig in the mines, hew in the quarries, tug at the oar, the slave must do it. He dares not refuse. If the devil bids a man lie or steal, he does not refuse, and, what is worse, he willingly obeys this tyrant. Other slaves are forced against their will. Israel sighed by reason of their bondage, Exodus 2:23. But sinners are willing to be slaves. They will not take their freedom, they kiss their fetters. Use 2. Let us labor to get out of this deplorable condition into which sin has plunged us, and get from under the power of Satan. If any of your children were slaves, you would give great sums of money to purchase their freedom, and when your souls are enslaved, will you not labor for their freedom? Improve the gospel. The gospel proclaims a jubilee to captives. Sin binds men, but the gospel looses them. Paul's preaching was to turn men from the power of Satan to God, Acts 26:18. The gospel star leads you to Christ, and if you get Christ, then you are made free, though not from the being of sin, yet from Satan's tyranny. If the Son makes you free, ye shall be free indeed, John 8:36. You hope to be kings to reign in heaven, and will you let Satan reign in you now? Never think to be kings when you die, and slaves while you live. The crown of glory is for conquerors, not for captives. Oh, get out of Satan's jurisdiction. Get your fetters of sin filed off by repentance. 2. And were by nature the children of wrath. Tertullian's exposition here is wrong, who by children of wrath understands subjectively, that is, subject to wrath and passion, offending often in the irascible faculty of a wrathful spirit. By children of wrath, the apostle passively means heirs of wrath, exposed to God's displeasure. God was once a friend, but sin broke the knot of friendship. Now God's smile is turned into a frown. We are now bound over to the sessions and become children of wrath. And who knows the power of God's wrath? Psalm 90, verse 11. The wrath of a king is as the roaring of a lion, Proverbs 19:12. How did Haman's heart tremble when the king rose up from the banquet in wrath? Esther 7:7. But God's wrath is infinite. All other is but a spark to a flame. Wrath in God is not a passion, as in us, but it is an act of God's holy will, whereby he abhors sin and decrees to punish it. This wrath is very dismal. It is this wrath of God that embitters afflictions in this life. For when sickness comes attended with God's wrath, it puts conscience into an agony. The mingling of the fire with the hell made it most terrible, Exodus 9:24. So mingling God's wrath with affliction makes it torturing. It is the nail in the yoke. God's wrath, when but in a threatening, as a shower hanging in the cloud, made Eli's ears to tingle. What is it then when this wrath is executed? It is terrible when the king rates and chides a traitor, but it is more dreadful when he causes him to be set upon the rack, or to be broke upon the will. Who knows the power of God's wrath? While we are children of wrath, we have nothing to do with any of the promises. They are as the tree of life, bearing several sorts of fruit, but we have no right to pluck one leaf. Children of wrath, Ephesians 2:3. Strangers to the covenants of promise, verse 12. The promises are as a fountain sealed. While we are in the state of nature, we see nothing but the flaming sword, and as the apostle says, there remains nothing but a fearful looking for of fiery indignation, Hebrews 10:27. While children of wrath, we are heirs to all God's curses, Galatians 3:10. How can the sinner eat and drink in that condition? Like Damocles' banquet, who while he sat at meat with the sword hanging over his head by a small thread, could have little stomach to eat, so the sword of God's wrath and curse hangs every moment over a sinner's head. We read of a flying roll written with curses, Zechariah 5:2. A roll written with curses goes out against every person that lives, and dies in sin. God's curse blasts wherever it comes. There is a curse on the sinner's name, a curse on his soul, a curse on his estate and posterity, a curse on the ordinances. Sad, if all a man eats should turn to poison, yet the sinner eats and drinks his own damnation at God's table. Thus it is before conversion. As the love of God makes every bitter thing sweet, so the curse of God makes every sweet thing bitter. Use 1. See our misery by the fall. Heirs of wrath. And is this estate to be rested in? If a man be fallen under the king's displeasure, will he not labor to re-ingratiate himself into his favor? O let us flee from the wrath of God. And whither should we fly but to Jesus Christ? There is none else to shield off the wrath of God from us. Jesus has delivered us from the wrath to come. 1 Thessalonians 1:10. 3. Subject to all outward miseries. All the troubles incident to man's life are the bitter fruits of original sin. The sin of Adam has subjected the creature to vanity, Romans 8:20. Is it not a part of the creature's vanity that all the comforts below will not fill the heart, any more than the mariner's breath can fill the sails of a ship? In the midst of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits, Job 20:22. There is still something wanting, and a man would have more. The heart is always hydropsical. It thirsts, and is not satisfied. Solomon put all the creatures into a crucible, and when he came to extract the spirit and quintessence, there was nothing but froth, all was vanity, Ecclesiastes 1:2. Nay, it is vexing vanity, not only emptiness, but bitterness. Our life is labor and sorrow. We come into the world with a cry, and go out with a groan. Psalm 90, verse 10. Some have said that they would not live the life they have lived over again, because their life has had more water in it than wine, more water of tears than wine of joy. Long life is merrily long torment. Augustine. Man is born to trouble. Job 5:7. Everyone is not born heir to land, but he is born heir to trouble. As well separate weight from lead as trouble from man. We do not finish our troubles in this life, but change them. Trouble is the vermin bred out of the putrid matter of sin. Whence all our fears but from sin. There is torment in fear. 1 John 4:18. Fear is the ague of the soul, sets it shaking. Some fear want, others alarms, others fear lost relations. If we rejoice, it is with trembling. Whence all our disappointments of hope but from sin. Where we look for comfort, there is a cross. Where we expect honey, there we taste wormwood. Whence is it that the earth is filled with violence, that the wicked oppress the man who is more righteous than he? Habakkuk 1:13. Whence so much fraudulence in dealing, so much falseness in friendship, such crosses in relations? Whence is it children prove undutiful, and they should be as the staff of the parents' age are a sword to pierce their hearts? Whence is it that servants are unfaithful to their masters? The apostle speaks of some who have entertained angels in their houses, Hebrews 13:2. But how oft, instead of entertaining angels in their houses, do some entertain devils? Whence all the mutinies and divisions in a kingdom? In those days there was no peace to them that went out, nor to him that came in. 2 Chronicles 15:5. All this is but the sour core in the apple which our first parents ate, the fruit of original sin. Besides, all the deformities and diseases of the body, fevers, convulsions, catarrhs, are from sin. Famine and a new crop of fevers oppressed the lands. There had never been a stone in the kidneys if there had not been first a stone in the heart. Yea, the death of the body is the fruit and result of original sin. Sin entered into the world, and death by sin, Romans 5:12. Adam was made immortal conditionally if he had not sinned. Sin dug Adam's grave. Death is terrible to nature. Louis, King of France, forbade all that came into his court to mention the name of death in his ears. The Socinians say that death comes only from the infirmities of the constitution, but the apostle says, sin ushered in death into the world, by sin came death. Certainly, had not Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, he had not died. In the day thou eatest, thou shalt surely die, Genesis 2:17, implying, if Adam had not eaten, he should not have died. Oh, then see the misery ensuing upon original sin. Sin dissolves the harmony and good temperature of the body and pulls its frame in pieces. 4. Original sin without repentance exposes to hell and damnation. This is the second death. Revelation 20, verse 14. Two things are in it. 1. Punishment of loss. The soul is banished from the beatific presence of God, in whose presence is fullness of joy. 2. Punishment of sense. The sinner feels scalding vials of God's wrath. It is penetrating, abiding, John 3:36, and reserved, 2 Peter 2:17. If when God's anger be kindled but a little, and a spark or two of it flies into a man's conscience in this life, it be so terrible, what will it be when God stirs up all his anger? In hell there is the worm and the fire, Mark 9:44. Hell is the very accent and emphasis of misery. There is judgment without mercy. Oh, what flames of wrath, what seas of vengeance, what rivers of brimstone are poured out there upon the damned. Bellarmine is of opinion that one glimpse of hellfire were enough to make the most flagitious sinner to turn Christian, nay, live like a hermit, a most strict, mortified life. What is all other fire to this but painted fire? To bear it will be intolerable, to avoid it will be impossible. And these hell torments are forever. They have no period put to them. They shall seek death, and shall not find it. Revelation 9:9. Origen fancied a fiery stream, in which the souls of sinful men were to be purged after this life, and then to pass into heaven. But it is forever. The breath of the Lord kindles that fire, and where shall we find engines or buckets to quench it? And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night. Revelation 14:11. Thank original sin for all. Use 1. What sad thoughts should we have of this primitive original sin that has created so many miseries? What honey can be got out of this lion? What grapes can we gather off this thorn? It sets heaven and earth against us. While we choose this bramble to rule, fire comes out of the bramble to devour us. Use 2. How are all believers bound to Jesus Christ, who has freed them from that misery to which sin has exposed them, in whom we have redemption through his blood, Ephesians 1:7. Sin has brought trouble and a curse into the world. Christ has sanctified the trouble and removed the curse. Nay, he has not only freed believers from misery, but purchased for them a crown of glory and immortality. When the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. 1 Peter 5:4.